When trimming weldments, the trim extend command found in the weldments ribbon bar can extend a structural member to meet another one or trim it where it interferes as shown here. So if we select trim extend, first thing we want to do is choose our corner type. If we choose the first one, end trim, and then we select structural body to be trimmed. In this case, I'll trim this diagonal member. Down here we have a couple of options. The allow extension is to extend. So if our parts already are interfering, we don't need that turned on. If there were a small gap up here, we would leave the allow extension turned on, and then after we trim it, it would extend and fill that gap. So the default when I switch to an end trim, and I've selected my structural member, is to tell it the face of the part you want to trim to. So if I select this top face of this structural member, we'll get a preview. We get a preview that looks like this. So what it's telling us, SOLIDWORKS is looking at what's happening and it's saying, okay, you have two bodies. This is body 1 of 1, this is body 1 of 2, and currently it wants to keep both bodies. We would like this body to only extend to this face, so we just click on keep, and that part will now disappear and it changes to discard. And as with anything, we can add a gap here for weld. So I'll say OK, and we've trimmed there. If I select this member again to trim, you'll notice I pre-selected this face. It assumes this is the trimming boundary. So I can right click in here and just clear my selection. Come back up here and say, okay, I want to trim this body. And again, to face or plane, well, in this particular case, we want to choose two faces. I'm going to select the face of this member, and then we'll also choose the face under here of this member. So now we have more selections on what we may wish to keep or discard. So we definitely want to keep this part, and we can rotate around and look. That gets discarded, this gets discarded, and in under here it thinks we want to keep this little piece. We're going to change that to discard. So now the tube will be trimmed to meet the corner. I'm going to repeat the trimming command. This time I'm going to select to trim this part and trim it to a body. And I'll select to trim to this body. And if we look at our preview, we can see it's going to be quite different. And at this point I can also right click and accept it. But wherever the tube potentially could go outside of the body, it's kept. Right? So you may want this in some cases to keep part of the tube as shown here. Typically we don't. So I'm going to switch this back to face or plane. And just select the underside of this structural member as our trimming face. Right. Remember, we always want to double check that says discard or keep accordingly. If we exit the command, it's not a problem. We can come back in and fix it up. Other trimming options. This time I'm going to trim this particular part, and I'll change the corner type. So I can have a miter joint, which really wouldn't work here, or I could tell it to end at the other part. So as soon as I switch my selection, it loses what I've chosen. So once again, I'm going to click on bodies to be trimmed and say I would like to trim this body. And my trimming boundary, I'm going to choose this other structural member. Okay. In this particular case, what it does is trim away both of the members. Okay. So it's not what we want in this particular case, and others it might be. With this type of trim, we also can choose to, do we cut the tube square, or are we going to cut it to the profile to the mating tube? And with anything, we can include a weld gap. If I switch the corner, all that happens is this. So a majority of the time, you'll want to use just the end trim and trim to the face.